The Anderson family had been scattered across different cities for years. Work, college, and life had kept them apart, but finally they had found time to be together again. To make the most of it, they planned a road trip to a quiet mountain retreat, far from the noise of the city, just them and nature. They rented a big, comfortable van that could fit everyone easily. The moment they hit the road, laughter filled the air. Old stories were shared, snacks were passed around, and playful teasing made the long drive feel shorter. For once, no one was glued to their phone. This trip was about family, about reconnecting, about making new memories. Hours into the drive, they stopped at a small, run-down gas station. The place felt frozen in time, with faded signs and a single old man behind the counter. While paying for snacks, Dad casually asked for directions to their cabin. The man gave them a long look before speaking. "You're heading up those roads at night." His voice was low, almost like a warning. "Many people get lost up there, and some never come back." Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Back in the van, the family laughed it off. "Creepy old man trying to scare tourists," Uncle David joked. Someone made a remark about horror movies starting just like this. But as they pulled back onto the road, a strange feeling settled over them. The mood had shifted. The sun had started dipping below the trees, and the road ahead stretched long and empty. The mountains were waiting. The mountain roads were nothing like the wide, busy highways they had left behind. They were narrow, winding, and seemed to stretch on forever. As they drove higher, the trees on either side grew taller, their thick branches reaching over the road like bony fingers. Then came the fog. At first, it was just a thin mist, but within minutes, it thickened into a ghostly white wall. The headlights barely cut through it, making it hard to tell where the road ended and the drop-offs began. Then the GPS lost signal. Dad tapped the screen, hoping it would refresh, but it was useless. "Great," Uncle David muttered. "Now what?" They slowed to a crawl, watching for any road signs, but there were none. Then someone noticed. They hadn't seen another car in over an hour. A tense discussion broke out. Mom wanted to turn back, but Dad was sure they were close. The map showed a side road that looked like a shortcut. "It'll save us at least 30 minutes, he said. The others hesitated, but with no better options, they agreed. The turn led them onto a dirt road barely wide enough for their van. Trees pressed in from both sides, their tangled branches blocking out what little light remained. The deeper they went, the quieter everything became. No birds, no insects, just a low rumble of the tires over uneven ground. Then, without warning, the van's engine sputtered and died. The dashboard lights flickered before going completely dark. Silence. Dad tried the key. Nothing. He waited a moment, took a deep breath, and tried again. This time, the engine roared back to life as if nothing had happened. "Just a glitch," he said, forcing a smile. No one responded. In the dim glow of the headlights, the road ahead disappeared into the mist. Something about this place felt wrong. The road seemed endless, and the tension in the van was growing. When they spotted a small clearing on the side of the road, Dad suggested they stop for a quick break. "Stretch your legs. Get some air," he said, trying to lighten the mood. No one argued. The place was quiet. Too quiet, but they were tired and needed a break. They lit a small bonfire, pulled out snacks, and tried to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled over them. The flames crackled, casting long shadows on the trees. Someone made a joke to break the silence, and for a moment it almost felt normal. Almost. Then Uncle David stiffened. "Did you see that?" he asked, his eyes locked on the tree line. Everyone turned, but there was nothing there. "I swear, there was someone standing right there." The others brushed it off. "You're just jumpy," Mom said, but her voice wasn't as confident as she wanted it to be. A few minutes later, MIA, the youngest, tugged on her mom's sleeve. "Someone called my name," she whispered. A man's voice, but it wasn't anyone from our family. The adults exchanged nervous glances. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe. Meanwhile, the driver, exhausted from the long journey, had climbed into the van to rest. He had just started drifting off when, tap, 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 his eyes snapped open. The sound came from the window beside him. He turned his head, his breath catching in his throat. A face, pale, blurry, just beyond the glass. His heart pounded as he scrambled to sit up, but when he blinked, it was gone. He forced a laugh, trying to convince himself he was just overtired. But his hands were shaking. Then MIA screamed. She was pointing at the van, her little face pale with terror. "The lady with no eyes," she sobbed. "She was looking at me." The family rushed to her, trying to calm her down, but then someone noticed the van's windows. The dust that had gathered from a rough road now had deep claw marks running across it, fresh, as if something had just scraped against it. A gust of wind blew through the clearing, but the fire didn't flicker. It went out completely. The night suddenly felt colder. No one spoke. They all felt it now. They were not alone. The fire was gone, but the night felt even darker now. A thick silence hung over the clearing, pressing in from all sides. Then came the first sound. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, circling the van. They weren't heavy, like an animal. They were light, almost cautious, as if something was watching, waiting. Dad stood up, grabbing a flashlight. "Stay here," he told the others. Uncle David, still uneasy from what he'd seen earlier, picked up another flashlight and followed. They stepped toward the trees, scanning the darkness. The beams of light bounced off the thick fog, but nothing was there, or at least, nothing they could see. Minutes passed. Too many. Then, a scream. Not a loud, panicked one. Something worse. A sharp gasp, then muffled shouting, as if someone's voice was being pulled away into the trees. Mom grabbed Amaya, pulling her close. The others froze, waiting, listening. Then, snapping branches, rustling leaves. Dad and Uncle David had vanished into forest. Aunt Lisa was the first to move. "We have to find them." No one wanted to, but leaving them out there alone wasn't an option. They grabbed the remaining flashlight and ran toward the voices. They found Uncle David first. He was standing completely still, his face pale, his hands shaking. His eyes were locked on something deep in the forest. When they grabbed his arm, he didn't move, didn't even blink. "I saw her," he whispered, floating. She wasn't walking. She was just there. Before they could ask what he meant, Dad came stumbling out of the trees. His shirt was ripped, deep scratches running down his arms. "We have to go," he panted, gripping his chest. His face was pale with shock. "She spoke to me." Uncle David turned, his voice barely audible. "What did she say?" Dad's hands clenched. "It was my voice," he whispered. "She whispered into my ear, using my voice." That was enough. No more waiting. No more second chances. They turned and ran back to the van. Dad jammed the key into the ignition. Nothing. He tried again. The van refused to start. Then, from the speakers, a low crackling sound. The radio had turned on by itself. But there was no music. Just laughter. Twisted, broken, wrong. The headlights flickered. Through the mist, shadowy figures appeared on the road. They weren't moving toward the van. They were just standing there, watching. Then MIA screamed. Her little hand shot up, pointing toward the roof of the van. "There's someone up there." Dad kept turning the key, his hands shaking. The engine refused to start. The radio crackled with that same eerie laughter, growing louder, warping into something almost human, but not quite. The figures in the mist were getting closer. The van was their only way out, but it was useless. Then, without warning, the engine roared to life. No one touched the gas, but the van lurched forward on its own. The wheels spun against the dirt before gaining traction, throwing everyone back in their seats. "Go! Go!" someone yelled, but Dad wasn't driving. His hands weren't even on the wheel. The van sped through the fog, twisting violently down the narrow road. Dad grabbed the wheel, trying to regain control, but the brakes weren't working. The headlights flickered, barely lighting the path ahead. The road curved sharply to the right, but the van wasn't slowing down. Someone screamed. Trees blurred past. The cliff's edge was coming up fast. At the very last second, the van stopped. No one spoke. No one breathed. The engine was still running, but the radio had gone silent. The mist had started to clear, and up ahead they saw lights. A town, civilization, safety. They reached a small roadside diner, still shaken, barely able to form words. An old man sitting at the counter overheard their story. As they spoke, his face grew pale. He set down his coffee, his hands trembling slightly. "You shouldn't have stopped there," he muttered. "That's where she waits." The room felt colder. He told them about the lost woman, a spirit who used travelers off the main road, trapping them in her world. Some vanish. Others make it out, but she follows them. No one who sees her ever really escapes. The family didn't say another word the whole way home. They just wanted to forget. But a few nights later, Dad woke up to something faint, a whisper right by his ear. The next morning, deep claw marks covered the van's side, the same ones from that night. Then, one evening, a family member stepped out of the shower and froze. A message had been written on the fogged-up mirror. "You found me. I found you too."